IFW Radio, another reason why freight is great.
Hello and welcome to another IFW News Roundup with me, Damien Brett. So what have we got this week? I'm going to be talking you through my news story of the week, and then after that I'll be handing over to Kat, who is going to, or I should say Kat, who is IFW's reporter, or one of the reporters in IFW, and she's going to be talking to you about the stories that you've been clicking on this week in our countdown of the most read stories. Now, I have to apologise to people for last week. I always seem to be apologising on this, actually. I should stop. But I have to make my excuses for not being on IFW Radio last week. I left Kizzy to do the whole show, and my only reason for that is because I was at Multimodal the week before. I don't know if anyone else was there, but it's a really good show in Birmingham, really good exhibition. Pretty much the freighting industry of the UK's main show, so yeah, really great opportunity for us to get out there and meet some of our readers. But yeah, so I was there and I was just knackered. By the time I got back, I'd spent so much time talking to you guys and writing up reports that I was dead on my feet. So yeah, I completely forgot to do the radio on Friday afternoon, and then, because that's when we do it, although it goes out Monday morning. So then Kizzy went to edit it on Saturday or Sunday, whenever he does it, but in his own spare time anyway, and suddenly had a bit of a shock when he found out that Kat and I had been a bit lazy and hadn't actually done anything. So yeah, I apologise to anyone who was waiting for their weekly update from me, which I'm sure is all of you. I'm pretty sure it's probably the highlight of everyone's working week, and you know, I can't blame you for that. But yeah, so sorry about that, and I'll try not to do it again in case anyone did actually miss it. Highly unlikely, but yeah. So this week there's been some interesting stories bounding around the press. Is that a phrase that I can use? I don't know. That have been printed in the press. I won't name any publications or anything like that, but one of the stories suggested that freight rates now on the Asia to Europe trade for a 40-foot container were below that of the BAF, the bunker adjustment factor, which is what the shipping lines charge for their fuel surcharges. Now, you know, it's not up to me to judge whether that's correct or incorrect. That's down to the industry itself. But someone described the story to me as scaremongering, which, you know, again, you know, I can't tell whether that's right or wrong. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting, because that kind of, those figures of the freight rate being less than the BAF, you know, which basically means the lines are making a loss on every container they move. That was being reported back in the middle of the recession, you know, a few years ago, when the lines were making pretty horrendous losses, and it wasn't long after that the lines started slashing services and putting ships into layup, and as a result, forwarders and shippers were having containers rolled over, and they're facing real service issues and facing trouble getting their cargo actually out of Asia into Europe. So if it is true, yeah, we could well be faced with a similar situation soon, which is good for no one. It's not good for the carriers because they're making a loss, and it's not good for freight forwarders or shippers because their cargo is going to get stuck out in Asia. So yeah, if it is true, a bit worrying. I did speak to a contact of mine who you know, is always accurate with his figures and his reports, and he said that some carriers were offering prices of $1,400 per FEU. He didn't say what the BAF they would be charging was, so I don't know whether it was more or less than the BAF, but what he did say was that the carriers that are offering rates that low for a 40-foot box tend to have the longer transit times, which just do not suit the majority of customers. So yeah, it seems like maybe that was true for some shipping lines, Sorry if you heard that noise. That was me just moving a bit of paper over because I've got all the figures written down somewhere, but I've laid them quite far away from me. So the average price for a container last week, or from Shanghai to Europe, slipped to 978 per TEU. But the average BAF being bandied about, and I checked on Maersk Line's BAF calculator, and it seems to be correct, is about 550 to 650 per TEU. So certainly based on those averages, it doesn't look like we're quite, or certainly that the whole market is quite at the situation of making a loss on containers and offering rates below fuel prices, although maybe that's true for some carriers. So I guess we'll never know, but you guys will. So that's basically my story of the week. Also, on top of that, there were some of the people I was speaking to, some derivatives brokers, freight derivatives brokers, and also freight forwarders were raising questions as to whether rates would get much above what they are at the moment, unless fuel prices go up, because that would obviously push the overall rate up as well. And that's based on the fact that Evergreen, China Shipping and Zim are about to launch a new Asia-Europe service at the end of April, which is going to add to the capacity. Ships currently sailing at 90 to 95% full again, as well, which isn't, from what I can remember from discussions in the past, that's not too bad. 95% full isn't too bad. But I suppose it's in anticipation of what is to come that the prices are going down week on week. Anyway, that's enough rambling from me. I'm going to hand you over now to Kat, and also for regular listeners, you'll notice how I managed to avoid mentioning any people's names or places where they're impossible to pronounce for me this week, and I think that's going to happen every week. In fact, I think this has been quite a good news roundup from me, so yeah, I'm patting myself on the back. So here's Kat anyway with the top 5 stories from IFW this week.
Thanks, Damien. Now for the top 5 most read stories of the week. So at 5th place with 568 views, it's Maersk set to order 10 more megaships. Shipping giant AP Moller Maersk is expecting to exercise its option in June to order 10 more of the biggest container ships in the world at a cost of around $1.9 billion. The delivery of the 18,000 TEU Triple E class ships built by Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering will bring Maersk's fleet of mega-sized ships to 20, and there still remains another option for even more ships. In Singapore on Wednesday the 13th, Maersk CEO Niels Andersen said, "The first decision is in June, and we expect that we will exercise the option for an additional 10. The company will decide later in the year whether to exercise the second option." The twin-engined vessels at 400 metres long have 16% more capacity than Maersk's current largest E-class ships and are scheduled for delivery between 2013 and 2015 at a cost of $190 million each. If Maersk decides to exercise both options this year, the deal would be worth $5.4 billion, the largest single contract in the history of shipbuilding. At 4th place, with 614 views, box shortages are likely this year. Leading lines and container manufacturers expect box shortages to emerge later this year, pushing up container freight rates. Speaking at the Sea Asia 2011 conference in Singapore earlier last week, S.S. Teo, MD of Pacific International Lines and President of the Singapore Shipping Association, predicted that box shortages might emerge as soon as April, early May. Thomas Ribber-Cudson, CEO of Maersk Line, Asia Pacific region, claimed shortages were already apparent on some trades. He warned shippers might be enjoying low freight rates now, but when the peak season begins in earnest this summer, equipment might be a limiting factor, along with rising demand helping to push up rates and driving a strong third quarter for carriers. And in 3rd place, with 794 views, carriers could be flirting with the red ink this year, says one analyst. Industry advisor Drury has downgraded its profit expectations for shipping lines this year, predicting they may struggle to break even. In its latest quarterly container forecaster, the advisor predicts that carriers will once again be flirting with red ink come the end of the year. It suggests that east-west freight rates, including fuel, will fall by 13.2% this year. But it adds that demand increases look strong, predicting growth in volumes of 8.3% in 2011. Drury blames the non-profit situation on ill discipline amongst carriers and too much capacity coming onto the market, and suggests vessel utilisation rates will slip below 90% on the Trans-Pacific and Asia-Europe rate trades in the July-August period. And falling rates could lead to volatility in the market, Drury said. And it added that the recent retrenchment of CSAV in the Trans-Pacific and suspension of the container ship company's single service on the same trade were examples of things to come. But it warned shippers against beating carriers down on prices. It said, "It is unlikely we will see any repeat of the lack of space or equipment that was so prevalent last year, which is good news for shippers, but this is not the time to beat carriers down with low rates, as this will do nothing to take away the current volatility." Okay, and at second place with 883 views is Asia to Europe rate still on the slide. Container rates on the Asia to Europe trade continued to slide last week, but vessel utilisation levels on the trade have climbed back up to 90%. The latest figures from the Shanghai Containerized Freight Index show that all-in spot rates on services from Shanghai to Europe slipped to $978 per TEU at the end of last week, down $14 on the previous week. Meanwhile, rates from Shanghai to the Mediterranean fell $15 to $963 per TEU over the same period. Reports in the shipping press have suggested that prices are now less than the average bunker adjustment factor, but one freight forwarder contact told IFW prices had not slipped to this level. The current BAF being charged by Maersk Line stands at $690 per TEU for a dry container, although this is set to increase to around $760 per TEU in May. The source warned that the new Evergreen China Shipping Zim Asia-Europe service, due to be launched at the end of April, could also adversely affect rate levels. Container derivatives broker GFI agreed that rates would not increase over the next few weeks. Meanwhile, rates on Asia to North America continued to pick up after the increase recorded 2 weeks ago. Prices to the US West Coast from Shanghai jumped $26 to $1,657 per FEU, while prices to the East Coast were up $76 to $2,981 per FEU. Okay, and that brings us to first place, and with 1,277 views, its slow steaming benefits are not being passed on. US shippers have hit out at carriers' slow steaming policies, claiming one of the benefits of sailing at slower speeds are passed on to shipping lines' customers. In a report submitted to the US government's Federal Maritime Commission as part of its inquiry into slow steaming, shipper organisation the National Industrial Transportation League, I'll call it NITL, said the only real benefit shippers could get from ships slowing down sailing speeds was from reduced fuel costs. But it said it appears from the feedback of NITL members and public analysis of the US shipping markets that to date, carriers have been reluctant to pass fuel savings from slow steaming through to shippers. In fact, many members have experienced increasing shipping costs since the implementation. NITL also said slow steaming had resulted in increased inventory costs. It explained that shippers had been forced to increase inventory levels because the longer sailing times meant more stock was in transit at any one time. The problem was exaggerated when service frequency had been reduced as a result of slow steaming. It was impacting shippers operating just-in-time supply chains the most because they needed to carry extra stock to guard against interruptions to supply chains. The reduction in frequency also pushed up prices because it had resulted in a reduction of supply. It had also been suggested that shipping line services would become more reliable because of slow steaming, as they would be able to speed up vessels if they were running behind schedule. But Little said that there was no evidence that carriers had become more reliable since the implementation of slow steaming, and the policy had also exaggerated container shortages because more containers are in transit at any one time. Little said US exporters were also finding it harder to compete against foreign exporters that could rely on overland transport or shipping services not affected by slow steaming. In a statement, Little said, Little urges the FMC to closely monitor the practice of slow steaming and to consider collecting data from ocean carriers on a periodic basis that will assist in analysing the effects of slow steaming on US commerce, including whether there is a reasonable balance between the costs and the benefits of slow steaming. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this week's news roundup. For more news, you can visit ifw-net.com, or alternatively, you can take part in industry discussions by tweeting us at twitter.com/ifwnet, or by liking our page on Facebook, which is facebook.com/newsifw, or you can join our LinkedIn group. You can just go and search IFW freighting or cargo and you'll find us. Now, I'm not sure whether we'll be doing a radio next week because of the bank holidays happening in the UK, so if we don't, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
IFW Radio, another reason why freight is great.